Chris Whalen CPA is back to talk about the article that I've had emailed to me probably 6,432 times, which is this from the American Journal of Medicine: COVID vaccine hesitancy and risk of a traffic crash. Now, if you're not familiar with this, what it basically says is that there is a correlation allegedly that the authors found between people who did not get vaccinated for COVID and get into more traffic crashes, I guess. That's like, to sum it up basically, but they have no idea why. I mean, am I right about this, Chris? Like, they have no idea why, but they're basically saying that if you didn't get the COVID vaccine, you are somewhere in the ballpark of like 75% more likely to get into a crash. And they surmise that maybe it's because you're just basically a public health rogue. You don't care about public health and you don't care about public safety. And that's basically where they leave us. They have tons of questions, which I'll read in a second, about, well, we don't know this and we don't know this and we couldn't find this and we don't have answers to this. And but we did find that it is a lot more likely to find somebody in a traffic crash basically that did not get a COVID vaccine. And then where does this lead us? There's a sentence in there I'll read a little bit later that basically, I mean, it doesn't even just hint at it. It says like, this may be a cause to raise insurance rates. So, okay, just first reaction, Chris. What did you think when you saw it?
I think it's a pretty weak link, of course, this correlation they're trying to make here. Of course, looking to eventually have more of a cash grab. I when I read this, of course, they're trying to look for a pre-existing condition similar to life insurance, right? So they're going to try to say that if you're unvaccinated, you have a higher risk of accident, so your premiums are higher. But again, who knows? We used to respect the American Journal of Medicine, and this is just another example of them going down the slippery slope of what seems to be some kind of propagandist almost kind of literature now, or reporting.
Right here in the clinical significance, here are the takeaways that they say. Okay, so I'll just read them real fast because the bottom one is the funniest to me. COVID vaccination uptake has stalled despite being safe, effective, and free. COVID vaccine hesitancy is associated with increased traffic risks. The risks in unvaccinated adults apply to differing patients and severe events. The traffic risks are comparable with the risks with sleep apnea. And finally, physicians counseling patients who decline COVID vaccination could consider safety reminders to mitigate traffic risks. So now your doctor, on top of pressuring you to get the COVID vaccine, is going to talk to you about running red lights because you're probably somebody who does both. I mean, that's kind of what they're saying. It's very weird. The whole thing is odd to me. That they even thought that this was something they wanted to study first is very
well. I
weird
mean, you've reported on this before. Certain groups, certain globalist type groups are looking to demonize the unvaccinated. So this is a very interesting way to do it, right? It looks like it's a very interesting clinical report, but all it's doing is to further say that the unvaccinated are bad, they're terrible, they're unpatriotic, they're rogue. So it's really just an attack on the unvaccinated. Or you could say that the unvaccinated are so concerned about the mental fog that the vaccine's causing that we're more nervous on the road because of who we're driving around. Yeah, can't you say that? It's of course you can twist numbers any way you want, but it's not meant to help. It's not meant to help public health or safety. It's going to be meant to increase premiums and punish the unvaccinated, which is what they wanted to do from the beginning, right? Think of how much they've tried to punish the unvaccinated from the beginning.
So yeah, well, no, you're right on, and this is like, okay, so let's get to the heart of it. Your thought on this, and then we'll go into kind of some of the questions they just leave hanging there. Is that this is a precursor to lack of vaccination becoming a pre-existing condition for insurance, essentially.
Right, exactly. Well, it's just like obesity for life insurance. So they don't really, and they'll do this without any real studies. This could take, this is all new. It would take us a decade or more to really try to tabulate information about causation of accidents related to vaccinated or unvaccinated. So just like they rolled out the vaccines without testing, a lot of them are still not accepted by the FDA. So this is possible, but again, they'll probably try to implement some premium changes long before we've had the usual length of time to study the phenomenon.
Okay, before we get into, I want to talk to you about media coverage because it's been interesting to see how, I mean, the corporate news, I think, kind of like eats this stuff up, right? So that's not shocking, and also just all the many things that are not answered by this, but just it's fascinating to me, like how many holes there are in it, and yet how many news outlets just like ran with it. This is a thing. But first, you know what we got to talk about? Well, we gotta, you know, what does increase your risk of getting into a traffic accident: drinking and driving. So don't drink Allison wine promo and get in a car. All right. But if you want some unvaccinated wine, because I can promise you at this point, even though I'm sure Fauci would love to vaccinate my wine, this is unvaccinated wine. Is the wine itself more likely to get into a traffic accident? Probably not, because it doesn't know how to drive a car, but you should not drink and drive. So I will just put that little caveat out there. However, time is running out if you want to do your Allison wine promo for a Christmas present. Okay, we got 1 week countdown. And you know that, as I say, these are my favorite wines. These are wines that I drink myself. They're very unique wines. They come from extremely remote regions of Argentina, from very high altitude vineyards. The one you see on the left, the Rogue Malbec, is a hand harvested grape made Malbec. The one in the middle is from almost 9,000 feet. That's considered an extreme altitude Malbec. Whenever I talk about extremism and wine, I tend to get booted from my stream for some reason. But I always say, like, if you're not an extremist nowadays, or you haven't been labeled one, you're probably still living in your mom's basement doing nothing with your life. It's time to become an extremist and get Allison wine promo. So get this for your loved one. Great Christmas gift. Helps you support my work. People like Chris coming on the channel. And if you're already a wine drinker, you got no excuse. Also, if you are a coffee drinker, remember you can go to twinenginecoffee.com/Allison, get some USDA certified organic coffee. There's light roast, there's dark roast. There's also a Katura tea, as many people know. You can cold brew it like I do, or you can hot brew it. These are all the coffees. You got espresso. There's the Honey Bear, which is like a medium roast. Elefante cigar #1 is another one of my favorites. It's a dark roast. The guy who started this company, awesome free speech advocate, used to write about cigars in Cuba, and created this company as a, part of his love for cigars and coffee. And he knows coffee very well. So trust me, these are great coffees. They're also high altitude. And like I said, they're also organic. They also do sampler packs. If you want to do sampler packs, I'm trying to, where are they? Well, let's just pretend like you can see them right now. They make these little packs, and you can do stocking stuffers and whatnot. So check out twinenginecoffee.com too, as well. twinenginecoffee.com/Allison. Okay. So, I guess the weird thing, like going back to one of my first big questions, I guess, is where they talk about vaccination status. I didn't really quite understand this one. And I am going to email these folks because I'd really like to, honestly, I genuinely like to have them on to talk to them about this. But I was getting this email to me, so I wanted to get on it faster than I know that the authors can get back to me. So, we'll put the questions out there, and then, hey, if they come on, they can answer your questions, Chris, and my questions too. But it says we identified individuals using encrypted identifiers from official government registries. So is this their, are they saying like they got vaccination status from government registries?
It doesn't tell us really anything. They could have named a few of them. There are very specific government, federal, and state registries, but that was one of my notes. They didn't even really name any. So who knows? Because a lot of people aren't giving information. A lot of these are registries where you volunteer information. A lot of people that volunteer information are vaccinated. The unvaccinated are less likely to. So it's very interesting to know where they get that data for comparison. And it didn't come directly from the participants. They didn't call,
Right.
they didn't call the people in the accidents to see if they were vaccinated or not. They try to go through a third party to try to match it up, right? That's what it seemed like to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, okay, so let's go down to the results. So this is one of my favorite parts of it. So first off, they'll say those who had not received the vaccine were more likely, in addition, to have a diagnosis of alcohol misuse or depression, and less likely to have a diagnosis of sleep apnea, diabetes, cancer, or dementia. So you're healthier, I guess. If you might be an alcoholic, but you're healthier generally speaking if you didn't get vaccinated, which I thought was hilarious. And then also it said about 4% had a past COVID diagnosis with no major imbalance between the two groups. So they also tell us that there's no difference between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated for the exact purpose of the vaccine, which is COVID, I guess. I mean, am I reading this correctly? I mean,
No,
they're saying
I agree with you.
So they're like, you might run a red light. You might be more likely to run a red light, but you'll probably still get COVID. Or you'll the same amount of people, you're going to get COVID regardless of what. So they sort of disprove the vaccine, which is interesting. Anyway, so they keep going down here, talking about blah 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 blah, consistency for subgroups, additional predictors of crash risk, and these are some of the things that they don't know. So they're saying like it wasn't necessarily that you lived in a rural area. They didn't look at political affiliation. They didn't look at a lot of stuff. Okay, here we go. Discussion. We studied millions of adults and found that COVID vaccine hesitancy was associated with significant increased traffic risks. The increased risks included adults with diverse characteristics who span the range of socioeconomic status and home locations. The increased risks extended across the spectrum of crash severity, including cases requiring ambulance transport and acute hospitalization. Okay, these are the limitation of our study. Correlation does not mean causality because our data do not explore potential causes of vaccine hesitancy or risky driving. So we don't really know. We don't really know the reason because we didn't look into why, people don't want the vaccine or why the people that they got, the folks in the crash, that they're studying, like what's their prior driving record. They didn't look at that. They didn't look at prior driving records. They didn't look at, okay, let's see, this would be one relation to it. You didn't get the vaccine because you don't have your driver's license, because you got it suspended or something, or you're poor, or I don't know, whatever. Who knows? And so you didn't get it. And you're not hesitant at all. You just didn't get the vaccine. I mean, they don't know. They didn't, like you said, they didn't interview anyone. So we don't even know the reason that these people didn't get the vaccine, right?
And we don't have any independently verified information about who they say wasn't vaccinated and who was vaccinated. So it's all based on, we just have to trust what they say are their sources. But it's very similar. I'd love to see a corresponding report very similar from the American Journal of Medicine that talks about the excess mortality the past 2 years and the causation. So that would be that should, because it's millions more people. But again, it shouldn't, this level of unsophisticated science 20 years ago would never have been accepted. Me studying studying these kind of things for the past 35 years.
Yeah, and this is just like another one of the paragraphs on limitations. The analysis is not correct for barriers in access to care or risk compensation, that each bias results in the contrary direction. And the analysis does not include minor crashes that do not lead to emergency care or deaths at the scene of the prior to reaching the hospital. Do not examine long-term recovery, quality of life, and insurance costs for those who survive. Many vehicle factors remain unexplored, including speed, spacing, configuration, location, weather, and distances driven.
Right.
The survey does not test the reliability of COVID vaccination as a proxy for COVID hesitancy. So that's another thing that's interesting.
I think it shows how they can cherry pick what they want, eliminate other variables to come up with their conclusion. It was when I read all these paragraphs, right?
Yeah, these uncertainties are further opportunities for future science. Basically, somebody else can figure this out, but we'll get the headline. So
right, exactly.
So, okay, I'm trying to find. Talking traffic abated during COVID. Okay, here we go. Our findings have direct relevance by highlighting how injury risks have continued despite the COVID pandemic. So basically, like, there's still bad things happening. I mean, it's still like we just want,
you're a wordsmith, so you're much better at it than me. But that when I read that sentence, it's a useless sentence because the COVID pandemic has nothing to do, with the overall history of car accidents. If you read that sentence, and so right, our findings have direct relevance, right? How injury
Right.
risks have continued. Well, of course, the COVID pandemic is not going to make more or less injuries with car accidents at all. Maybe an infinitesimal amount. So that's why that sentence didn't make any sense to me.
Well, as you were saying before we even went live, you have clients that you went and reached out to. Like, have you seen more accidents? And they're like, no. Explain what you were telling me.
Right. Well, at first, when I saw this, I was thinking, no, there's something to do with unvaccinated or vaccinated that would have something to do with an increased risk of traffic accidents. Right. That was what I would
Mhm.
think. There's something causing more accidents. And then when I called them, I started to feel silly because because the being unvaxxed, we've always had unvaxxed people for COVID for the past 100 years. So there shouldn't be a difference in accidents. They're just saying that now we can target people who are responsible for the accidents, and one of the corollaries is the fact that they are unvaccinated. So I tried to call clients, oh, have you seen any uptick? But I was not thinking correctly because that's how much the initial headlines in the article and the study made me
Mhm.
think. I didn't realize what they were saying for a good while till I started to dig into the study.
Mhm. So, primary care physicians who wish to help patients to avoid becoming traffic statistics, for example, could take the opportunity to stress standard safety reminders such as wearing a seatbelt, obeying speed limits, and never driving drunk. The observed risks are sufficiently large that paramedics, emergency staff, and other first responders should be aware that unvaccinated patients are overrepresented in the aftermath of a traffic crash. Why should they know that?
Right.
Well, I mean, what?
I know. It has nothing to do with treating someone at a car accident scene. Like,
And then finally,
why would an EMT need to know when I'm lying there in a car wreck that I'm unvaccinated? Why would they need to know that to treat me? They don't.
yeah, exactly. That was another weird thing. And then here's the kicker. The observed risks might also justify changes to driver insurance policies in the future. I haven't looked at, funding for the research or whatever, but I would just be curious to know, is there any connection here with it just seems weird. Seems weird, especially since you've been hearing insurance folks like BlackRock whistleblower people type talking about increased mortality around the world, during this whole rollout and questioning that. So it almost feels like I'm not saying it's a response to that, but it just feels like it's like this dialectic here where you have insurance people talking about increased mortality and health risks associated with vaccination, and now you're having no, it's
This,
it's you're it's the
well,
unvaccinated people. They're the health risks.
this whole paragraph on the screen is meant to make medical professionals, doctors, EMTs, fear you, feel that you're odd, alienate you, and like if you look, the EMTs reading this, I would think I would be more fearful to treat an unvaccinated person than a vaccinated person in a car accident, right? So this is all meant to demonize and ostracize and to make unvaccinated people feel odd and have others feel that we're odd. There's something wrong with us, and we should be avoided, or we need our doctors to tell us to wear a seatbelt. So there's an 80-year-old man out there that was
Mm.
unvaccinated whose doctor's going to have to tell him to not wear a seatbelt. That's insane that someone would write this.
Yeah, and then together the findings suggest that unvaccinated adults need to be careful indoors with
Right.
other people and outside with surrounding traffic. What
Right,
is
right,
that?
right. So, well, they're having accidents in the house. You see, they're playing bumper car. I guess that this whole paragraph was insane to me that anyone wrote any part of this. Right? I
Yeah,
mean,
like doctors. I mean, let's go back up to the top here. I just need to like, see who these people were again. Yeah, MD, FACP, uh, MMASC. So yeah, two master's degrees and one medical
and
doctor.
I really like all of the commas, but I say, look, if you look at the bottom of my screen, I just have one simple comma after my name. I think one or two might suffice. Sometimes it gets to be a bit too much. All right.
Um, Yeah. Okay. Wait. Let's go back to this one real fast. And then Rogue Thought says not counted as vaxxed until 2 weeks after the shots, and they don't, they don't take into that into account either. I didn't see them say anything like, we this is who we considered vaccinated or unvaccinated,
Right. Well,
right?
don't
I didn't see
forget that
that.
you can, so like Canada, they can tell you that you can't get car insurance. That's, I mean, might not be in America now, but there's no doubt Canada could easily implement that you can't get car insurance, because this is leading to this, right? Tr- Trudeau will cite the study that shows that you're higher risk, and we have to save the broader public, just like getting the vaccines was supposed to be. So that's all this could be used for in the past, right? It's going to be cited. This is why we're going to restrict you, or you can only drive during daylight hours, things like that. So believe me, it's going to be used for some purpose in the future, and it's not to help us.
Okay, one interesting thing here that I did notice this. Okay, so Tina's saying in the chat that I heard on Clyde Do Something. This research paper was funded $50,000 by Canadian government under a program to promote jabs. If you click on this footnote here, we identified individuals using encrypted identifiers from official government registries. What the link is to Living and Dying in Ontario, an opportunity for improved health information, Institute for Clinical Evaluative Sciences, Toronto, 2008. Um, so there's some link to Canada here, but I have no idea.
Right.
I have no idea if it was funded by the Canadian. I have, honest to God, I have not looked into that part yet. So
Well,
maybe Clyde's onto something.
I think something, we're all, and watching your program, which is fantastic. You make people think outside of what they're reading. So 50 years ago, we would have taken a study like this and we would have said, oh, they're doing it for scientific reasons. But unfortunately, we've seen that things could be used for other reasons. And there are agendas that have now insidiously been imposed in a lot of our most trusted institutions, right? You'll agree with me. So
Mhm.
when I read this, it could be good science, it could be worthwhile, but I can't help when I read some of the things that I've read in here, that you've read too. It seems that there are vagaries in here, and that, of course, it can be used for a broader agenda in the future, not necessarily just for the sake of science. And I think you probably agree with me on that.
Oh yeah. Well, first off, just I'm going to look at this in a second. Just the topic itself, that people are choosing to study this, that there were people who said this would be a good idea to spend time on, you know? I mean, you could look at like our well, let's talk about, I mean, I have to be, since we're live on YouTube, I would sort of be somewhat careful talking about this, but I did a video about with Dr. Stephanie Seneff, who's an AI computer scientist at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, very, very prestigious institution. And she and Dr. Peter McCullough had uh, basically analyzed data from VAERS, the vaccine adverse event reporting system, and shown that there may be a link with suppression of the innate immune system. And so, you could look at, if you're going to talk about insurance or life insurance policies or whatnot, you could flip this script very easily, like with their study, for instance, and say, okay, well, what does that mean if your innate immune system is suppressed and you are more likely to end up with a chronic disease, cancer, whatever? But that didn't make the headlines, not like
Right.
this one did,
Of
So
course.
yeah, there's the choice to do the research in the first place, and there's the choice of the media organizations to report on it and not really do much critical thinking when reporting on it, because the confirmation bias is already there. They want to believe that this is true.
Remember, my clients at the medium-sized business level, when they see things like this, they're concerned. They're pretty savvy. They'll say, Chris, this means that this is going to be used for social credit score reasons. So they'll go to rent a car one day, and this is going to come up that they've been flagged, so they can't rent a car, or they have to pay more of a rent-a-car fee, or they can't even get a rental car because they're a higher risk for being unvaccinated. And then the rental car company will use this study as a basis. So I think everyone's very concerned about these things being used, as it's been used to segregate society, and to remove, services. Like, look at banking. BitChute still has money at HSBC that it can't get. So I think even my medium-sized clients know it could happen to me if there's a bank that doesn't like you. So when they see studies like this, especially the unvaccinated, like I'm unvaccinated, for example, so I get concerned about it if it's going to come up again.
Well, and I think, yeah, I mean, I think all of those are, these are all these are just interesting questions. Obviously, there's no real way to know right now, the intention necessarily, but they do make it very clear when they're, it's technically buried, I guess, but it's in here that, it may be a reason that you need to have increased insurance rates if you're unvaccinated. And I just, I think it's fair for
I've
people to be
never seen a
concerned about
study.
that.
I've never seen a study that discusses if you're in a study related to car accidents that talks about you being in your home, having to be careful around people that are unvaccinated. That when you're inside the house, right? I mean that's one of the main things I pulled out when I read it. I'm like,
Yeah,
what?
no, that's so true. I'm looking up, yeah, I'm trying to find I mean, like, this is Vice's. I'm trying to find funding information. Um, this car.
Yeah,
They just like pull a Getty photo like of a car crash. I mean, all of this stuff it's hilarious to me because it sets you up to, this is an unvaccinated person, like we have any idea. Um, yeah. So, and this is, we theorized that individual adults who tend to resist public health recommendations might also neglect basic road
right.
safety guidelines. And I think, that's another thing that I think we should be paying attention to, because like you were saying, there has been so much narrative control around dogging the vaccine resistors, but it often gets thrown into the same pool as like the right wing extremism. And well, like Elon Musk letting the misinformation agents back on Twitter, and he's also now a white supremacist. So it's like all these things get linked to not getting your COVID vaccine. You're like you're sort of a domestic miscreant,
Right.
ne'er do well. And so, yeah, so they're basically putting in people's minds that, like, if you didn't get the vaccine, you just don't care about safety at all. It's not that you care about public health safety and grandma safety and all these other things, which is what we heard over the last 2 years, right? You don't care about the safety of others. You're out to kill people with your virus giving, because you didn't get the vaccine.
Right.
But now on top of it, you also don't care about other public safety. You don't care about you don't care about crashing into people. You don't care about you're a threat to you're
Right.
technically a threat to
And
public safety. I mean, that's essentially what this says. It's
and
not
don't
even an
forget
undertone. I
they
mean, that's
for years they want to punish the unvaccinated. So this article and the study is going to be a perfect device to use against people who are drivers for a living. Think about people who drive school buses with children. So now companies, I have companies on both sides of the aisle. Some have been concerned that the vaccinated could be foggy. Should I let them be drivers or pilots? Right. We've heard about that. But now I get the flip side. This is what's going to come now is, Chris, do I have a liability? Oh my God. If I know they're unvaccinated and they're at a higher risk of accident, should they be driving kids to school in a school bus? That's how this makes people
mhm,
hysterical.
mhm.
So that's
Yeah,
what they
and I
want.
like how it's like vaccine refusers. That's what Vice calls them, which is true. But there's never. I mean, rarely these outlets do not do a good job at all discussing why people have chosen not to get these vaccines. You know who actually also did? This is funny. Is this the Onion? No. Um,
Right.
let me look it up while we're talking. What's his name? Prasad, Dr. Prasad. Let me look him up. He did traffic crash, COVID vaccination. See if I can find it. Here we go. So he's been kind of an outspoken critic of the narrative on Twitter and elsewhere. I've asked him to come on before. Okay, do unvaccinated people need to be counseled to drive slower? Vinay Prasad. An important paper came out yesterday, but not for the reason the authors think. They found that unvaccinated people are more likely to end up in a motor vehicle accident than vaccinated people. Let me be clear. I think it is ridiculous to think that lipid-wrapped mRNA spike template could lower car accidents. The only plausible explanation is that people who get vaccinated are more precautious. They may drive less, more safety in cars that have more safety features, etc. This finding only tells you that the two groups are not comparable. They're different in ways other than vaccination. And I'm going to scroll down a little bit. Continue reading. Okay. Here, okay. Primary care physicians, this is the quote that we've read, who wish to help patients avoid becoming traffic statistics, for example, could take the opportunity to stress standard safety reminders such as wearing a seatbelt, obeying speed limits, and never driving drunk. This is ridiculous. The authors have no evidence that this intervention will help, and in particularly, it works preferentially in unvaccinated. They're making things up, and that is shameful. And then here's another one. The observed risks might also justify changes to driver insurance policies. He says this one is just plain sad. They want to leverage this information to discriminate yet again against unvaccinated without evidence or understanding that this discrimination may even further vaccine hesitance, vaccine hesitance, and create more animosity to authority. Overall, the paper has one useful fact in it. Vaccinated people are different, and that is why we need RCTs to support perpetual boosters and cannot rely on observational data, but the authors are so misguided. So I think he's pro booster. I'm not even quite sure, but you even have doctors who are like very mainline, like Dr. Prasad, who are looking at this and saying like, what the heck? So I just thought that was interesting.
Right.
It's not even just like, you don't have to be an anti, whatever they want to call it, like that, what advice call it, vaccine refuser. You don't even have to be that person to look at this study, because I'm not sure that this guy is, I think he's pretty mainline, and even he looks at it and is like,
but I'm sure there's going to be families who now will not let their kids go on a play date in someone else's car because they're not vaccinated, because there's a 72% chance their child is not going to come home alive.
That's so fun. That's a really interesting point. Well, it's also just, like,
well, that's what it's meant to do, right? That's what it's meant to do with the family's idea. What this filters down, and some of them, they're just hoping that this journal, which is supposed to be prestigious, well, they wouldn't lie. So that's what I'm glad that's going away. And I'm telling all my clients to be much more suspicious of the source, even if it was like CDC, for example. Look what the CDC is now compared to what it used to be.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I kind of wonder, going back to the study, because we were talking about this before we went live as well. Whenever something starts trending like this, and it just seems so ludicrous, this like first level would just be to be like, this is so stupid. This is so crazy. Why would you do this? And the second level of sort of, I think, questioning would be like, what would be the purpose of this? And I think we've talked about some of it. I mean, is there an intentional drive to, like you said, like increase insurance rates, or to continue to discriminate against people who chose not to get the vaccine? Is there an even more nefarious purpose behind this? Like, I don't really know, but when you think about, well, like thinking about, to go back to Dr. Prasad, who's like, it's making it worse for people when it comes to those of us, like, in medical authority positions. People are not going to trust their doctors anymore because these, more and more these ridiculous studies keep coming out. And I kind of sit back and I wonder, because I actually think that that's, like, to me, that's a positive thing, actually. Not necessarily that I think people should just be like never going to ever see any healthcare professional, because there's like, I'd just rather stay home and die because I don't trust them anymore. I don't think that's a positive outcome of all of this. Because I do know people who have just refused now to go see a healthcare professional because they're so down the rabbit hole. On the other hand, I think questioning the healthcare system broadly is a good thing. Like, things that we take very much for granted, as just like, why can't you question the flu vaccine? You know what I mean? This is the thing. It's like, it's safe to question the COVID vaccine, but then when you start talking about, everybody starts to freak out. And that's why, like, you have doctors who are like, we have to get this, this back in line because people are not going to trust authority anymore. I'm like, maybe that's a good thing, that people are starting to wake up to the bigger picture.
Before I forget it, so your first point you just started with was, well, who is this meant to influence, right? Or, well, we know it's not meant to influence the unvaccinated, because we're already unvaccinated. We're suspicious of all this already. All the unvaccinated people I know, like me, they would never give any credence to this. So it's definitely meant to keep influencing the vaccinated.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
So it's not, I don't think it's meant at all to sway a unvaccinated person, or
Mhm.
it's meant to make them worry about anything. But what I'm seeing in my practice, which is, all right, so I love what's happened the past few years because we've stopped looking at reviews online that much. We have people talking to people, and there's different groups now. So I have groups of unvaccinated people who have found really good doctors for themselves, because there are doctors who didn't just go with the CDC line and are more open to discussing things like ivermectin, things like that. So I find that it's a little bit, it's like before the internet age when it comes to, we were just talking about medical professionals. So I'm seeing much more of a personal interaction and people of like mind finding like-minded physicians, especially pediatricians. That's been one of the biggest, most interesting things I found, right? Is that there's pediatricians who are ostracized, but they're getting a lot more business in certain areas. So that's important.
Yeah.
I like that all this has happened from a small, medium-sized business perspective, because we have all types of professionals, medical professionals, legal professionals. I now have clients who are looking for like-minded, because like-minded lawyers, not just
Mhm.
about vaccines. So, and it's really, so I mean, my business has been growing even more than usual because I'm known for being unvaccinated. At least I'm open to discussion about it. There are other
Mhm.
accounts out there that will not take you if you're not vaccinated. I've actually had clients that they will not get a meeting even now if they're not vaccinated.
I wonder if it's gonna, everybody gets concerned about banking nowadays. I wonder if that it'll ever go in that direction. It would seem weird to me that that would have any connection, but now, in today's world, I mean, you just never know. Mary, oh, and when you walked to the restroom in a restaurant, the virus appeared, but when you sat down, it went away. Remember that rule? Yeah, I mean, it's maybe the unvaccinated have to go to the bathroom more. Somebody should look into that and see if that was part of the problem. Okay, I did find the funding. It was supported by a Canada Research Chair in Medical Decision Sciences, the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, the Graduate Diploma in Health Research at the University of Toronto, and the National Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada. The views expressed are those of the author, do not necessarily reflect the Ontario Ministry of Health. So it is very connected then to the Canadian government. Well, no surprise there.
Right.
No surprise there. Okay, well that makes a lot of sense considering they basically they cut banking capacity abilities for the protesters and have no room for diverse thought when it comes to that topic. So I guess it's interesting though because you didn't really see that in the coverage either of a lot of in the articles that I saw. It seems like it's in the American Journal of Medicine, so you're talking about America, but actually the data was from Canada. Well,
Right.
looks like it anyway, right?
I know. Well, that's what I said at the beginning. That's what I said at the beginning, that there's no way that the funders of this, which are probably very friendly with the government, there are going to have anything negative come out. So we just have to take it with a grain of salt. It's not, there is, I don't know, except for your channel and many others, independent creators and reporters and journalists that are unbiased. We used to have that, or maybe we never did. We just had very few outlets that we could even research to see if we should trust them. So that's why your channel is, and others like it, are extremely important. That's why I'm like, and I appreciate being able to be on your show to spread my ideas, and it definitely helps me get my message out.
Well, I appreciate it, Chris. My producer and her stuffed dog have entered the studio. Can I show off Chaka? Yes. Okay. So anyway, what do you think about the study? I think it's so stupid. I don't know why they did it. Okay, anyway. Don't forget, she's cute. That's right, Lily. I don't know if you can hear. So cute. Don't forget, everybody, you can go to AllisonMorrow.locals.com and and sign up to be part of my editorial board. Chris, any final thoughts before we go?
No, but thanks very much. I just would my website is ChrisWhalenCPA.com. I do a lot of blogging and podcasting on my own, but really related to business issues, specifically tax, things like that. So please take a visit. You could easily join my email service, and you'll get all my information. And yeah, look forward to our next topic.
Me too. Oh, here we go. All right. Thanks, Chris. Thanks again for coming on so quickly. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Have a great weekend. I have my editorial board tomorrow for local, so you still have time to sign up and become part of the editorial board. Give questions, feedback, all kinds of stuff. Go direct with some of the most censored people on the internet. AlisonMorrow.locals.com. See you next time.